Cultural historian and teacher Jacques Barzun has been at the center of America's intellectual life for 6 decades. Born in France in 1907, he came to the United States in 1920. After graduating from Columbia University, he joined the faculty there in 1927. He spent the next 50 years there, ultimately serving as the dean of faculties and provost. At Columbia, he led the charge for a new core curriculum and devised a colloquium on classic text that came to be known as the Great Books. He has written more than 30 books himself and received the Gold Medal for Criticism from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. His latest work is entitled From Dawn to Decadence. It recounts the religious, political, artistic, and social revolutions that have shaped Western culture for the past 500 years. I am pleased to have him on this program. Welcome to the program. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Decadence?
Frightening word.
It is.
But I don't regard it as such. Because it's obviously the beginning of resurgence by clearing the ground. Everything that falls apart, which is all that decadence means, yes. Makes room for such new ideas as will arise quite inevitably, because history doesn't stop.
Yeah. So then you could say that decadence is the last step before Renaissance or something like that?
Yes, exactly. And that's the way I think to look at it, rather than to imagine that everything goes down into chaos. It conceivably could, as it did to the Roman Empire, because there were hordes of barbarians who invaded the territory. But any barbarians are already here. All
right, let me just talk about this book. Why 500 years? What made that the magical number?
It's partly traditional. The modern era for professional historians begins around 1500.
Now, why is that?
Precisely because the preceding century was one of decadence, institutions falling apart, the church itself, which was the most important institution, corrupt and full of abuses, which made it ineffectual. The officials of the church itself said it needed reform from top to bottom. And the people who had strong religious feelings were looking for something new to believe in. Cults proliferated, new schools were established, efforts were made to create a new life. And it didn't happen until what I call the Protestant Revolution rather than Reformation, because it split Christendom in two and started all sorts of new things. Not to mention the fact that about the same time the New World was discovered with all the potential of new activities, acquaintance with new peoples, exchange of foods and ideas and problems. The notion of utopia came from the discovery of the New World, which was pure, sane, noble.
Now, what do you mark in the discovery of the New World, 1492 or?
92,
okay.
In an actual fact, but the influence began about 25 years later in Europe.
All right. What was in place in Europe in 1500? Obviously, Queen Isabella was in place. Who else?
Well, Luther, the Pope.
Martin Luther, the Pope?
Yes.
Yeah.
And various monarchs who were then only kings as one among equals. The king develops into the absolute monarch as a result of partly the Protestant Revolution, which upset a lot of things, brought new forces into power, the bourgeoisie feeling its oats and saying we can't go on mutual massacre, we have to have order and system. And that led to the nation state as we know it.
Now, there are some who are saying, in an interesting way, as I had a whole series of interviews on this program marking the end of the millennium, or the beginning of a new millennium, there were those who were saying because of the internet, because of technology, we were going to witness in the next century the decline in importance of the nation state. So if you take this 500 years, you've seen the birth of the nation state and now the end of the nation state.
Absolutely. It's already in decay. If you look all over the globe, separatism is the dominant emotion and desire and, in many places, action.
You mean like the Balkans, for example?
The Balkans, but look at England, the good old
Scotland.
England, Scotland, and Wales
yes, they
have
want
parliaments of their own.
Yeah. Well, they want to create independence.
Oh, yes. In France, Brittany has always felt that way. Alsace-Lorraine,
of course, Alsace-Lorraine
felt that way. The Basques in the southwest.
Yeah. Now, here is the question, though. Some would argue that you're saying that that Western civilization has reached a point of decadence. Apart from what we have observed about the nation state, there are others who say that we are entering a new era because of the new internet revolution that will make the West even stronger in its power, in its influence, in the transportation of its values.
Rather less, I think, in the transportation of its values than the transfer of its techniques and technology. That is going strong. There's no decadence that I can see in science, although we're not getting very powerful ideas as happened at the beginning of this century. But the amount of ingenuity and resourcefulness of the scientists and the technicians is marvelous. So that will continue very strong. But the arts, literature, social thought, political sagacity, they're all in decay the way the nation is.
All right. Let me take some 4 seminal events if you look at the last 500 years, starting, for example, with Madrid around 1540, Venice around 1650. Pick up on Madrid first, then Venice, then what else?
I'm not sure I quite get your question.
You said that, I think you said that you divided the last 500 years into 4 distinct periods, which are to make 4 revolutionary.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
The first revolution is the Protestant Revolution, which deals with, on the one hand, the system of the church, on the other, the belief of the people. The next revolution is the monarchs, and I sketched a couple of points about it a moment ago. The king no longer has to cope with any number of dukes who want to be his equal and perhaps succeed him with the help of a little assassination or two. The monarchs establish and confirm the nation state. The test is the king, has the king the monopoly of war and taxation? When he has those two things,
he reigns supreme.
No rivals can attack him. Yes. Then the third revolution is the liberal revolution, the French of 1789, which had been in preparation for a good long while, and which goes on to this day. There are people who still want the minimum liberties that it established.
Carried forward by the American Revolution.
No, the American War of Independence, not revolution. It was a nowhere revolution. It was reactionary. It was going back to the good old.
Yeah, but who am I to argue with?
Go ahead. Professor it's fun.
Barzun. But who? Jefferson.
Yes.
His principal sources for shaping his thought came from France.
Oh, perfectly true. But the motive power, which was distributed among the states here, was the desire to get back to the autonomy that they had and the ancestral liberties. It wasn't the ideas of Jefferson or the French.
Okay, but I would argue that the American rebellion was against was for religious freedom, was against a system in England.
No,
No, would you tell me? But it was also for. I mean, it was also for something new. That it was a reaction against something old, but for something new. And for something new were those ideas put forward by Jefferson and others?
You're assuming that the Constitution, as it finally was framed, was a desire that started the war, and I don't think it was.
No, I don't think it was either. I agree with that.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, but what started the war was rebellion.
Yes, rebellion in order to get back to where we were those happy days before England bothered us.
Okay, but taxation and all that.
Yes.
Without representation. But added on to that were some of the ideas that Jefferson incorporated from his reading of French philosophers.
It's difficult to measure the amount of each. You assign to those ideas more power than I do, and we will agree to disagree.
Okay, fair enough. Now, and so the next period is after the French Revolution. What's the next period? You got the
next period is the social revolution, which begins early in the 19th century with the theorizing of the so-called utopian socialists.
Right.
It's utopian socialism, Marxist socialism, the welfare state, finally. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, the Western world now is quasi-socialist under different names.
A kind of quasi-welfare state.
Yes. Well, wholly welfare state, but quasi-socialist.
Right. Yeah, welfare. You also, and you maybe these ideas all kind of come and connect together.
Yes.
You suggest that there are maybe 10 or 12 powerful themes that have been part of the last 500 years in Western culture.
Yes.
What are they?
The main one I call emancipation. And I don't call it freedom, because to be emancipated from some constraint that one feels, which may be genuine or imaginary, doesn't necessarily make you free afterwards. You suddenly discover all sorts of other constraints and difficulties.
With freedom and responsibility comes bounding into you.
Yes, and we can see it all around us. Everybody wants to be rid of something or other. Moral rules, for one thing, two-piece suit in offices. Everybody wants to get out. And the cult of nudity, I think, represents something of that desire to get rid of civilization. And that brings on the second theme, which I call primitivism, which is a recurrent thing in the 500 years. At various times, somebody, then groups, and the mental set all demand getting rid of civilization. The key document is Edward Carpenter's very interesting little book called Civilization, Its Cause and Cure. Mm-hmm. And in the early 16th century, the Protestant Revolution was based on primitivism. Let's get back to the early church, when there weren't any bishops or popes or decretals or rules or anything of the sort. Just worshippers happily together.
So you got emancipation, you got primitivism, and what else?
Then, with the advent of science, you get, and the philosophy that went with it, you get two new, more abstract impulses, which I call abstraction to begin with, and analysis. They're connected. Science analyzes, that is, it takes things apart and tells you what's inside. We got down to the atom, then we broke the atom, and then we've got any number of particles, and it can go on forever. It's the endless onion that you peel with no end in sight.
Same thing in biology.
Yes. And the habit of analysis then begins to attack everything else. We get criticism, for example. Literary and artistic criticism takes things apart. And what results when you're not dealing with material, as in biology, say, is that you find the product of analysis to be an abstraction. Abstraction takes the form of words, and then people begin to live by words. And they get farther and farther from the real thing, the feel of the real thing. And that let's say, in politics and economics, in human relations, is a destructive thing. At the end, we arrive at what we call virtual reality, which is an admission that we're not here in this world. We're floating above it.
That's right.
Inside a dictionary.
Yeah. You're following everything that is current. Who is the prominent figure of the last 500 years? Who is the most influential figure?
You're asking a question which historians are generally unwilling to answer. That is, which is the first? Which is the oldest? Who is the greatest?
I realize I'm doing that, but just give me who would be at the top of, near the top of your list, without making it a thing of a choice.
Since I haven't thought along those lines, in conformity with professional ethics, I find it hard. In one way, and this may surprise you, Napoleon was such a promoter, partly conscious, partly unconscious, of the libertarian ideal, career open to talent, institutions to be razed to the ground and built up again according to the revolutionary ideal of 1789. He probably was such a tremendous influence, it'd be hard to find a rival. But if you go into the arts or philosophy or science, then there are other people. And that's why the one man in 500 years is not a tenable idea.
You have always in your life, turning to your life rather than the life of Napoleon, been a strong advocate of a liberal education.
Yes.
As the best thing that a citizen needs to carry forward and fully function in our society. Tell me why.
To make it a brief answer, because properly taught and learned and acquired, a liberal education awakens and keeps alive the imagination. And by the imagination, I don't mean fanciful things, but I mean the capacity to see beyond the end of your nose and beyond the object in front of you, to see its implications, its origins, its potential, its danger, its charm, all the things that enable one to navigate in this difficult and complex world with a modicum of wisdom, with calm, not to be alarmed at every little thing that happens, and with resources that in moments of stress and after retirement, in illness and loneliness, keep one's soul and body alive.
The great books idea.
Yes.
Was that your idea?
Oh, by no means. Oh, no.
Where did you, what role did, I'm taking the great books idea as now, and sometimes Robert Hutchins and others.
Yes.
Articulating it as a curriculum for a liberal arts education.
Yes. No.
Did you sign on to that? Did you have anything to do with that?
I can tell you in brief the history of the movement. A man who became a professor at Columbia named George Woodbury found that the curriculum in his day was made up of snippets of this, that, and the other thing that had no coherence and that left the student with not a trace of the college courses that he'd taken. So he inspired one of his students, John Erskine, who also was at Columbia, but in the next generation, to create a group course. That is, it was a group because students had to be selected owing to the difficulty then of managing such a course, who would read the great books from Plato to William James. skipping, of course, from peak to peak. Along the way, you read Aquinas and Dante and Voltaire and Rousseau and so forth. That was a course in Columbia College, established 3 years before I entered the college, and I took it. I was lucky to be admitted. There were 2 groups taught by 2 instructors, and we read a book a week, and that's why the students had to be chosen, because not all the students wanted to do that or were able to stand the gaff. From Columbia, it went to Chicago by way of Hutchins, as you said, simply because Mortimer Adler, who was one of the instructors in that course, became acquainted with Hutchins. They worked together on a book, and Adler, as he always did, proselytized and converted Hutchins, who said, when he became president of Chicago, we're going to turn Chicago upside down and inject the great books, which they did. And then, since there was faculty resistance to making the great books a curriculum, St. John's College, which had been in a bad way, was revitalized with somebody's money, and it established the great books as a complete curriculum.
St. John's College somewhere down in Maryland?
Yeah, Annapolis.
Right.
Yes. Now, I do not believe that the great books constitute a liberal arts curriculum. They contribute to it, yes. But there has to be history, the social sciences, and some of the principles of the great books curriculum are quite wrong. For example, you cannot learn science by reading Euclid and the science of Nicholas of Cusa in the late Middle Ages. It's not modern science, and modern science requires laboratory work and so on. So that the great books and the liberal arts curriculum are 2 distinct things that overlap only in part.
My last question, sort of, this is Time magazine from June 11th, 1956, some 34 years ago. Here it is, you, and the title is America and the Intellectual, the Reconciliation. Has the role of intellectuals in American life since 1956 increased or declined?
It depends how you look at it. Starting with the New Deal, the intellectual and academic world particularly have been involved in government. They go down to Washington. And the Second World War intensified that relationship. Now, whether the world corrupted the intellectual or the intellectual world is for somebody else to decide. But what the world takes from intellect has always been a fact. It's only whether it's done at first hand or indirectly through the current of ideas. If we look at the history of ideas, we see that they've influenced the world from the word go. I never understood what was meant by reconciliation.
Okay, in that article.
It may simply mean that there was less making fun of the professor with his domed head, the egghead, or the highbrow. Highbrow is a word you hear less and less now, and that may be all that's happened.
Back to something you chastised me for earlier. It is that most people, in choosing Time magazine, in choosing the most influential person of the millennium, or of the past 100 years, chose Albert Einstein, an intellectual.
Yes. But one could question his influence, couldn't one? In a broad way, he influenced all of science, and he's made us all aware of certain words, relativity, time, space, and so on. But has the life of the ordinary individual been much influenced by Einstein? Certainly his political and social ideas were were very naive. He never spoke to the world on those topics.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you in this program. The book is From Dawn to Decadence, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.